We will probably cut short a little bit on exercise 3, but I'm super happy with the flow in general. We will now get a little bit more in the ins and outs of the tools we are using and try to manipulate more the tools. Now after that we know how to manipulate the prompts and how to get what we want to get. I first need to wait for this to work. So, from simple chat to AI assistant, the core idea is that while a chat is all nice and all beautiful, it does not allow us what we want to do with an assistant. For example, we tried this already with defining a customer persona and then continuing in the chat with the customer persona. So the idea is that not only do we use the AI like a search machine or anything, but we try to get more out of it. We want to be a little more efficient. Let me move this down. That the persona already knows, the AI assistant already knows some prior information that we want to share. It goes a little bit in the direction of when you want to implement this in an organization, then it should know some parts of the organization as well. It will save us time as it will be more catered to the needs. It's also more personalized towards who we are, what our needs is, and it is available for when we need it and scalable for ever replication. So for example, we could think of creating an assistant that is just a generic customer. So think like a customer. What do all customers have in common? We could think about this. I don't know, maybe they all are happy. I don't know what customers have in common. I think they are so unique and so wonderful, all in their own regards. So we want to use an assistant, and I think a lot of you already have done that. You probably have some chat windows open that do some work for you. For example, you might have a chat open, or maybe this is an idea that you might want to take that helps you a little bit with your workout and your nutrition, and you might try that out. Give a chat a lot of information about you, about your health data, about your preferences, what you like, what you don't like in terms of sports, in terms of nutrition, and you probably will get a rather helpful and way more personalized assistant that helps you way better than when you just Google what should I do for workout today. You maybe have the same thing for mindfulness. Again, mindfulness should definitely be one of your top priorities when you go to entrepreneurship. Antoine and I have both made our experiences with not taking enough care of ourselves while running a company. It broke the two of us, and it's an experience that I would wish for you to avoid when you start something. Same, of course, is true for mentor or coach, particularly if you're a developer. One very nice thing is a co-developer who should focus a little more on architecture, super helpful if you just have an assistant for that, or an expert that helps you with prompt engineering, also very, very helpful. In particular, when I'm a little bit lazy on writing perfect prompts, I just wrote an assistant who writes perfect prompts, and I say, I want this, please make it a nice prompt, and it usually does it. Sometimes also it doesn't. Wonderful. Where do they live? Depending on what system you use, everywhere. In ChatGPT, of course, you can write a chat yourself to make it your own. The problem that you have is, as I said, you do not have control over the systems command where you want big parts of the assistant to live, but you put it in a very early user command and hope for the best. There is this GPT's marketplace you can go in. You can get in the pro subscription, where you can get assistants that you either can build yourself. It's actually super easy. So you define the systems message, you define what kind of prior knowledge it should have. For example, give it all the data of your semester. Let's say you're a student, and give it all your coursework that you have and say, okay, this is as assistant. Please help me do my homework, or explain some things that I did not get in class, or other things. You could do that for your startup when you upload all your documents. If you want to do that, obviously, I said there are some security concerns that you need to figure out for yourself if you want to do that. And of course, there is a ton of helpful assistance already on there, in particular for coding or for writing text. Very, very helpful things there as well. If you have other tools that you're using, then it might look something different. Perplexity AI, for example, is very heavy already on assistants, and you can barely use Perplexity without having an assistant, but it very much depends on the tool. What is the assistant now doing, and why is it still very important to write good prompts? We have always the goal, when we interact with not an AI, but with every system, with every technical system, our goal is always to get the best response that helps us, that serves our need. With a prompt, then we already were trying to ask the right question. But so far we have done it to a generalized machine, and now the assistant engineering, or building an assistant, is asking the right machine as well. So let's stick with GPT for a second. GPT, by definition, is the most generic model that they could build. That's just the value proposition. And now we try to do the opposite. So we don't try to interact with this general purpose machine, but we want to be a little bit more specific. Like if you want to get from A to B, you could get the most generic car that you want, depending on your preferences. That might be a Prius, for example, which is great. In most cases, it gets you to A to B, except for if you want to get an entire team of football players from A to B, then a Prius is probably too small. So we want to adapt the machine to match our need perfectly. For that, we have now the prompt, write an email. And GPT in general draws its data from everywhere it can. It will still do that, to be completely honest, but I think this makes it a little bit visual. It's completely all over the place. It still will write us an email, but it will write an email that is generic, that might not be perfect for what we want to do. Rather, we want to be a little bit more specific. For example, if we write a more specific prompt, we already have the better selection for the output that we have. But we also want to make sure that it does not go beyond its limits, and we want to define the limits and say, okay, this is your machine now. Whatever you do, please stay in here and do not go outside anymore. And this is exactly what the assistant does. We give it a limit in context, weigh context a little bit differently, depending on what we have, and thus having the most successful conversations that we have. Of course, this means that we need to know what we actually want. Because once we define this assistant that does its thing perfectly, it will not be able to do other things anymore that are outside its scope. And how do we do that? First of all, we have to think, which is a little bit of a letdown because we came to an AI microclass, so we were thinking maybe we don't have to think anymore. Actually, we have to think even more if we're using AI properly. What are our objectives? What do we want to do with this particular AI? What should it handle? Second, we design the conversation flow. This is something where you need to understand the ins and outs of prompt engineering by heart, because this is basically giving the entire process. We need to start thinking in processes when we talk to an AI. What is the process? What do I give in? what is the interface, what is the logic that the AI needs to do itself, what is the data, do I give the data, what is the AI's data that it has to itself, what are the interfaces like in APIs that it needs to attach to, does it need to know the weather, is it my personal, what's it called, dressing assistant, apparently I don't have one, so that probably should need the weather, that probably should also know my calendar so it can justify what I should wear at some point. So we need to design the flow of conversation and the flow of reasoning the AI needs to do for itself. Then we need to construct very precise prompts. These should be the best prompts that we write so far. They should be crafted so every single time the AI gives us exactly what we want, so we can use the assistant for every time we need it for that. Let's stay with the example of the nutritional coach. Then probably we want the nutritional coach, then every time we ask for a recipe, to give us the recipe plus nutritional content, plus some suggestion for a training that we could do after this meal. So every time we use that, that would be super helpful. Another example that I have is a team that I'm working with. They want to work against food waste, and their solution is that you make a photo of your fridge, and it tells you from this photo what you could do, what you could cook. So the assistant, they of course build a very low-code tool at the start. So the assistant would get this picture, GPT can take a picture, GPT can also look at the picture and say what is on there, what nutritional content does it have, and the assistant would then be added by nutritional preferences. For me, for example, it would be vegan, for you it might be something different, and based on those preferences and what we have available, it can tell us what we should use next, because what is perishable and what we could cook out of this data. So be very precise in what we build. This can also be a product as you've seen in this particular example. Iterate and redefine. This is probably the longest part that you will spend on the building of an assistant. It's never done. There's always something to improve. Sometimes you think you improve something and it's also actually retracting a little bit of the quality. It goes in that prompt engineering is not really a science, but more a prompt massaging. Also, when you change your assistants, it can become quite complex instructions. It might by accident make it worse than actually better. So try it out, try different scenarios. It might work under, and go to a point until you say, okay, now it's actually fine for me. And then test and evaluate. GPT, for example, gives you the ability to publish your assistants, which might be something you want to do, maybe not. It's a great way to gather feedback on it. If you don't want to share it, then you, of course, have to do all the testing and evaluation yourself. So there are multiple ways on doing this. The first thing is custom integration with ChatGPT. We will look at this now. Most of you should have access to ChatGPT in a way. The second would be the chat interface of the OpenAI playground. For those of you who do not have access to ChatGPT, you might still have access to the APIs. As they are not as evil. The others are also not evil, but I don't know corporate politics. And that might be something you want to look at. Also, this is where we will now look at temperature and all this funny stuff. Why ChatGPT is actually not just a front end to an API, but a whole product. You can create a custom GPT in ChatGPT. We will also look at this. It requires ChatGPT Plus, though, which of course costs a little bit money. And customize the AI, the assistants on the OpenAI playground. The OpenAI playground requires a little bit of knowledge how systems work, but this should be fine and should give us a good overview. Okay, Let's start with customizing ChatGPT. Are you aware of this feature that you can customize your ChatGPT? No, this is one thing you all should definitely do. It's very on the down side where you have all your settings. When it asks you, how do you want to customize your ChatGPT? The annoying thing, of course, is every time you have to interact with ChatGPT, it doesn't really know who you are, where are you living, what are your preferences, what kind of output do you want. So if you're, for example, very much rooted in the factual world and you would like to have sources for everything it tells you, then every time you have to write the prompt, please provide me with sources, please provide me with at least 2 sources or something like that, could be really, really frustrating. Or here you have the opportunity to, in every new chat that you open, to add a systems messages, actually 2 systems messages, where you can say things like, I am 22 years old, 34 years old, I am living in Munich, I am an entrepreneur, I know technology, so you can talk tech to me. And these are 1,500 characters twice, so 3,000 characters in total, which you should definitely use. They will always be in the context window, and they will help you so much to get exactly the answers that you need. Ups and downs to it. Ups, it's always in the context window, so it always answers the way you want it to answer. Downside, it's always in the context window, so if you want to be entirely neutral, that is something you cannot do. Now you can, but if you want it to be completely neutral, then you have to think about enabling a new chat that for the couple of chats that you wanted to be used, that you disable this. Let me show this quickly how this looks in my ChatGPT. I know it's hard to read, but I will guide you through it. So in my ChatGPT, this would be down here on the left. I say customize my ChatGPT, and here are a lot of things. So here, for example, I do have one that helps me with keeping my weight. So he knows how tall I am, how heavy I am. He knows when I'm born. He knows my languages. He knows what I studied. He knows so much things, and some things I do not want to share with you guys. Sorry for that. But this gives it all context. So whenever I ask a question, he can refer to this information and say, okay, my problem, that's the problem you can read, is, for example, I'm trying to understand French. So when he talks French to me, he knows that he should do it on a rather easy level, because I'm in French on level B1, not very good. I studied physics, so it knows that when I ask it a physics question, it can be a little bit more technical, and it can get a little bit more in-depth than it could when I would be studying something completely different, right? And this is super, super helpful when we try that out. Here, a new window. There's a feature called temporary chat. If you put on the temporary chat, then it will not use this information. But if I just ask it, what is quantum entanglement? I hope this works now. It will give me... Exactly, I asked it always to give me a summary, a detailed explanation. That is something I wrote in my statements. And I always asked it to give me an opinionated part, which probably comes out in a second. Here it is. And it does it exactly this way because I asked it for me to answer questions like this. I can also say, okay, don't do that for a new chat, and ask it the exact same question again. And let's see how this changes it.
So would you put that in how would you like ChatGPT to answer?
I'll come back to this in a second. Mom. First of all, we can see the typical speed of the Wi-Fi. And I already go back to this, should work right. So I'm not putting it in the beginning of every chat, I'm just putting it here in my systems, in my customized ChatGPT. So it's using it for every single message, no matter if I explicitly tell it in the chat or if I don't put it explicitly in the chat. If I have this now implicitly in the chat because it's in the system message and I say, please ignore that I studied physics, it probably won't do that because it's right there in the systems message and it cannot forget about this. Okay, this would be the answer. It's hard to read, I understand. This is the answer it gives me without my system message, which talks a little bit about very, very top level. It's a phenomenon in quantum physics, doesn't even tell me what it does exactly. That Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen, that is correct in 35, have an ERP experiment that is also correct. So it is all still correct, but it's a super high level, whereas of course this here is more detailed. In particular, this part is a little bit more catered to giving me more parts in the details. So this is something that all of you, we probably don't have the time to do it in class, but at home, please fill this out. This will be the highest productivity booster if you haven't done so in your ChatGPT game. So custom instructions would be tell it about yourself, what do you do, and how would you like to interact with GPT. I'm not even sure why these are two windows, probably to give it a little bit structure. I'm not sure if it has a technical reason. How would you like GPT to respond is where you give it the kind of reasoning that you want to have. Yes? I think if it has conflicting information, it doesn't try to resolve it, it just tries to guess the next token as it always does. Yeah. I think we would have to run an experiment how it would respond if you say in the customized always respond in bullet points and in the other always respond in a table. I'm not sure if the one overrides the other or one format overrides another format. I actually don't know. That's probably something that we would have to try out. Okay, something to enter in the About You section. You can see here a lot of suggestions. Look at it in the slide deck. What might be helpful. You can see things from what is your professional role, what is your passion, what are your current projects or challenges. I heard from some of you that you wrote in that you're a entrepreneur working on a particular project, which is a fantastic thing to put in here. Of course, it will always look at you through this lens. You can talk about your values, you can talk about your personal backgrounds, specialized knowledge, communication style. So there's no limit. Whatever you think is part of your identity and whatever you think is important to know, what other people might implicitly get from us, or how you introduce yourself to others is probably a good idea to also let ChatGPT know. It's the only piece of reference. So this is basically the picture you give ChatGPT about yourself, who you are. So yeah, background, professional, privately, hobbies, you know that. Personality, in identity, a small biography, what were the most important parts in your biography, of course, that are relevant to the questions you ask. You don't have to tell it about your best vacation if this is not relevant to how you usually interact with people. Goals, aspirations, always super helpful. And what to use ChatGPT for with startup ideas and stuff. 2 tips to that: update it very regularly. So whenever something changes, when you have another hobby, another project that you're working on, that's probably a good time to update it and be very explicit. Again, ChatGPT has no eyes, cannot see what you're doing, what you want. So do that. A third tip probably is also let it know about your weaknesses. So if you think that you have a shortcoming that ChatGPT can help you to work with you against, then also talk about this. So try to get a nuanced approach to yourself through that. What you should use in the reaction section. There are things like, is it the same? No. Your task, what is the usual task? How should you approach the task? What is the response format? The level of detail, types of questions. What should it use itself? So for example, I put in that it always should answer its reasoning, always use sources, something like that. Always be very factual. Those are things that I put in. Of course, be aware that you might put in biases there. If you say, always do this and that, then it always does this and that, no matter what the bias might be. But here you can give it a lot of guardrails, of guidelines on how it should react. You first?
If I want to change that role, or if my role changes, and I change that customized role in ChatGPT, does it forget the last one, or is this forever somehow in the background?
Yeah. So how does it work when I change something? It basically works like this. If I have a chat, if I open a chat, it takes the role and requirements from the date and time when you open the chat, and it keeps it forever. When you update those now and you continue this chat, it's still in this chat. The old one is still in the chat. When you update it and put it in a new chat, the new chat will use the updated one. Yeah, exactly. Another question?
I'm not sure that was previous question. So I wondered, I guess the answer is no, if there is any provider of a large language model or any sort of AI where you can like individualize your own system even more. So say, okay, it's in the form of an app or I don't know, a website, and that it's not like ChatGPT, but you can let's say change those filters that you draw on the table behind you, like to look, for example, after the like
Mm-hmm.
headed there, so that I could say, okay, today I learned this, and today I had this interaction with that person, and it made me understand this, and I feel that in that way today, so that every day I can individualize this interaction.
The question is if, it's basically two questions. The one is if you can, if there's a system that gives you more control of customizing what you want to interact with. And the second part of the question is if you can do it more dynamic, if you have daily specific. To the second question, I'm not aware, but I love the idea. That would be super cool to basically have an AI that reacts on your daily form. Again, I'm not aware that there's something out there. Maybe this is an opportunity for innovation. To the first one, we will look in 2 slides on how we can go deeper into the interaction. You were touching on 2 points. The one is basically bypassing the entire application that is ChatGPT, that we will do via the API. The other idea that you slightly touched upon, or may have touched upon, or I misinterpreted is fine-tuning, which is a way of changing the parameters inside the neural network according to the inputs we give. We will look at fine-tuning in the 5th date, so in the 3rd AI microclass in September. Until then, I can tell you, yes, there is a solution to make this work, but we will not have time to look at it today.
Technical, or is it also possible to do that within, for example, ChatGPT, or are now the rules set by OpenAI so narrow
there are opportunities that GPTs are, to my understanding, are doing fine-tuning in a limited way. It's to do it properly, so to have a strong fine-tuning with a lot of data, then we would go into the use case again of having an entire company's data and use it to fine-tune a model. That would be something that is a little bit more technical. With a little bit, I mean much more technical. But to say, okay, I just want to fine-tune it with my personal data, for example, what I would be super interested if I would have a local LLM that runs on the data of that I created over the last 20 years on my computer. That would be super cool. This is something that we can somehow do with ChatGPT+. Another question? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm not aware of, I wasn't aware of you.com, but what it probably does, that it stores the system message, which in that case probably does not call itself system message in some kind of permanent storage, maybe even an SQL database, and then feeds that probably by a framework like LangChain in whatever API on whatever model you're using there. So it keeps, or it sounds very much that it keeps the data that you give it as assistant data outside the API calls. Wonderful. So this is still something that we should do with you.com, with ChatGPT. So we have our data stored, ask for reasoning, ask for chain of thought. So there are some best practices we have also touched upon on the prompt engineering time that of course are still true, that we should ask or could ask every single time in here, and it will do critical thinking, it will be skeptical, it will be scientific, whatever we want every single time. It can do that, it will do that. Opinionated, task-oriented. You can also ask for a specific language. If you say always ask answer in English, always answer in German, always answer in Bavarian, that actually might be super interesting. You can add your own kind of algorithms there, algorithm more in the part of what do this then that in text-based speech rather than add to every time or something like that. Maybe you can try that as well. But if you say every time I want people to interact with me or machines to interact with me in a certain way, put it here in the reaction section. And now we will go exactly where this comes to. The ChatGPT, not the ChatGPT, sondern the GPT API playground. It's the graphical interface of OpenAI, and I will show it to you now. So it's very hard to see, but if you scroll down at the very top, at the very bottom of the barely visible website, there is a small button called API Login. And if you do click it, you can get, oh, this is really, really bad. Well, let me see if I can close those shades. Never. No, I actually don't know how. I actually don't know how. Great. So what you see here is already the create an assistant assistant deep dive. So it gives you also a lot of context. This is also it came up the question where can I read up on a little bit other things. It's all in here basically where you can adapt your assistant playground. This is exactly where we want to go. If you don't go through that, then you will find the playground, and on the playground you can find basically everything. Here, first of all, you can see explicitly written out for the first time system, user, and assistant. So if we do shot engineering, we, for example, would probably put the shots in assistant, so we will tell GPT that the shots were answers that GPT already gave us. Whereas the user message is, do a sentiment analysis, assistant, this is really bad, sentiment negative, this is really great, sentiment positive. And here are the two things we were, no model available, I don't care. The two things we were already talking about, the temperature and the top P. Let's only talk about the temperature because the result is somewhat similar. If we put the temperature to 0, then it will always give us the most probable token, probable next token. And this is exactly what we were discussing on several instances. Is it deterministic? And an LLM is deterministic but chaotic. You know the difference? Chaotic is still a deterministic system, but if you change the starting conditions a little bit, the outcome conditions will be very different. That's basically what all cryptology does. So you just change one letter of the password, and the encrypted password will be completely different and no resemblance to the original password with just one letter changed. This is exactly what, of course, you want for cryptology, and this is not because you want it, but this is one of the effects of a LLM. So you just change one token, so every other following token will be altered as well. So if the temperature, you allow, so to say, the LLM to randomly choose a token that is not the highest probability, but also might be one that is of the second highest, third highest probability. Let's say again, my favorite food is. Highest probability might be bagel, second highest probability might be pasta, third highest probability might be pizza. If you allow it to get a next token at some point with the second highest probability, then everything following that will be different, thus the chaotic part, and this is exactly what temperature is. But only that as a note, because it came up today several times. This is what we can do here. You can try it at home. If you ask a user question here with a temperature of 0, if you ask it 20 times, you will 20 times get exactly the same result. Whereas if you put it to 2, I think 2 is the maximum, you will probably get very wild and very differing answers as a question. No, the API is accessible for everybody. The API is paid per use, and the API has per se nothing to do with ChatGPT. That is the GPT, that is the OpenAI platform. So ChatGPT is a product of OpenAI, and the API is basically the other product, and this here is all on the API side. Here in the playground, you can also use that so if you want to cheat the system, you can use the playground to do GPT calls with GPT-4. Downside is it's very limited and not persistent. And of course, we can now build an assistant, and this is what we can do if we want to go a little bit deeper. Just create an assistant, give the assistant a name, give the assistant's instruction. This is basically what we would have done in the personalization part of of our GPT, and I'm totally with you, and I did not think this through. Does this instruction override the system instruction I give it as a user? Do they coincide? Is one prioritized over the other? I actually don't know. I'm sorry for that. And here are other things that you can do. For example, you can give it files. You can give it functions. You can give it a temperature. You can give it a top P. And once you have done this, you can run this. Assistant. You can use that via API. As far as I'm informed, you can also use it in ChatGPT, although I'm not 100% sure right now. But this is where you would go. It's the playground in ChatGPT, in the GPT. Yeah.
The playground now. Do I need an API to something where I can then send prompts from and get the results back, or can I actually type into the playground?
You can directly type into the playground. The idea of the playground is, let's be with the chat playground, that when you call the API, you of course have your API token, and you send a systems message, a user message, and a system message maybe several messages, and wait for a response from the assistant again. And why they built a playground is before you want to go into your coding environment and write out all these. This is a handy way of trying what system messages, what user messages, what assistance messages give you the API response that you are looking for. And if you're happy with that, you can just copy and paste that to code. All right. Yes?
Can we do the same exercise that we did in the API platform as well? Like the one that
Oh yes, absolutely. So once you have your assistant here up and running, you can also interact with the assistant. It's of course living only in your API environment, but you can talk to the assistant here.
and it is in the same level like ChatGPT does, or it's more?
Yeah, you can choose somewhere. You can choose the model. Here you can choose the model. So GPT-4, of course, is the model that you use for the paid version in ChatGPT. You can use GPT-4 Turbo, which might be a good solution if you want to give it to a front end of your choosing, because it's way more price sensitive. Or you go to 3.5 Turbo or something else. Also, when we're talking about pricing, it can become very expensive. However, if you're using the API for private purposes, even if you use it all day, 8 hours, it probably gets to some euros. So it will not ruin you. Last time we did that, we called my API. It was open for, I think, 50 people for an entire day, and in the end I had a bill of 20 euros. So it's really okay. You can control it also very much with the usage. You can put limits to that. So don't worry if you're using a pay-per-use API in this case. It's really reasonably priced. All right. So this is one version you can use. You again, pay-per-use. It's all fine. Here you can put your assistant. You can save your assistant. Clone your assistant, put the assistants here. That is where your assistants live. This is now my untitled assistant. Very easy, very nice thing. This is also probably the most powerful way of using assistants, because there it has no limits of how much data you can put in. The question of how much can I customize it, there it's completely unlimited. of course, if you put gigabytes of file data to this assistant, then the API call will be way more expensive than if you just put a couple of pages on it. Okay, so that was the second option. The third option, oh, that's still the second option. Okay, we've been through most of that already. We've been through all of that already. No, we haven't been through maximum length. Maximum length is another character or another parameter that you can set here, which basically says how long can the answer be, how many tokens. In the standard case, it's 265 tokens, which is a rather short answer. If you're looking for a longer answer, you might, I see it, might want to do it a little bit longer. Why you might want to keep it short if you have very rapid calls, API calls in succession, then of course you want to avoid it to write very, very long texts all the time and want to keep it to something, something reduced. And top P and temperature again do the same. There was once this saying that you should either adjust temperature or top P. You can do both, you can play around with it. It both change the randomness and the diversion of the answers that you are getting. Question?
My question would be, for me it's not fully clear when it's better to use the assistant with the API than the normal ChatGPT individualization options.
Yeah.
What are the different use cases?
Sorry. Yes, the question is when to use the custom-built assistant and when to use the customized ChatGPT. I would say always use the customized ChatGPT because it just helps ChatGPT understand who you are. So always put that. And the customized assistants, use that for repetitive tasks that you have. For example, if you have to do a quarterly report for the board or something like that, and it's always the same 10 steps that always have to be done the same, then why not build an assistant for that? Those 10 steps that you have to do in 5 days of work, why not let an assistant do that in a couple of minutes and be done with it? Other popular assistants are scientific writing assistants. So when I make a not conclusion, but I proclaim something, then make an assistant to challenges to either back that up by sources or contradict that by sources. Coding is another very popular thing where you can give the assistant just some best practices in architecture, in coding and stuff like this. So basically for all the tasks, all the workflows that we all have in our organizations that are super repetitive but still have to be done with a particular set of skills, a particular set of knowledge, and basically a particular algorithm. So every time we do it, we do the same consecutive steps. Then it's time for an assistant. Another question?
Could I use this assistant as well to build a chatbot for my website, then implement it on my website, put all my support data into this assistant, and then
Absolutely.
it's only for private?
No. So these assistants that you have here, they will have, they are on the playground. They are, sorry, I don't know I don't find it now. They are also accessible via the API, so you can use it there. If you're on the assistants that you built here, that you cannot. So in ChatGPT, they only live in ChatGPT. But for example, I built a co-founder Copilot with the knowledge of, so the open knowledge that we have at the Venture Labs. So you can always interact with that and get probably the answers that I would also give you in a way shorter time. But I'm also thinking about putting on our website a co-founder Copilot that I would love to build with this and just give it the general knowledge that I would think, like give it the knowledge of the microclasses, give it the knowledge that we use for all of our courses and engagements, so you can have a self-service. And I think it's a fantastic usage of customer service, of customer engagement and sales and marketing to use an agent for that, an assistant. An agent is something different. An assistant who does know about your company or about your service and offering. Yes?
Am I correctly understanding that the assistant that we create within the ChatGPT is different from the assistant we create in API, and it's kind of interconnected?
Yes, yes. So these are basically different ways of creating an assistant. Everything you do in this API interface is made for the API, so made for usage in the outer world. And everything that happens in GPT, in ChatGPT stays in ChatGPT. It's something like Las Vegas. So you can build super easily assistants in ChatGPT, but they will only live inside ChatGPT. And if you want to say, for some reason, it really does not matter so much. If you build one in either place and you want to build it in another place, then just rebuild them. It's also not a rocket science. You can see it has 3 sliders, 3 text, 1 drop-down, 2 more sliders here, and then 2 file uploads and a function upload. So it's nothing, it's no rocket science. So if you build it in one place and you want to have it in another, then just rebuild it there. You cannot make mistake. This is what I want to say. All right. So this is the second option where we can put it. Wonderful. System user assistant. We've been through that. I think I don't have to recall that. System is the top message, user is what you say, and the assistant is what we reply. The only cool thing is that the playground allows you to tell the assistant what the assistant says. So you say 2 + 2 is, and then you change to assistant and say 5. And then the assistant will always say 5 because it needs to be self-consistent and it cannot contradict itself. So this is a fun little gimmick that you can use very much for shot prompting, for example. Temperature, we already been through that. Luchette is that thing. Top P is then again how much probability do I allow? Do I also allow the super unprobable tokens to be chosen at some point at random? Again, if I want to use my assistant for some engineering purposes, I probably do not want it to be too creative in the way to come up with tokens that are super unlikely. So I want to adjust that probably. So I might want to adjust it accordingly. But you can read this up on the slide deck as well. And lastly, oh, we're good in time. Lastly, you can customize the actually, this should be 3 first. Okay, then we jumped over 1 custom GPTs in ChatGPT, which of course live here. On the Explore GPTs, you can put here on the top right, say create a GPT, and basically you're doing very much the same that you would do in the ChatGPT interface. So the create is basically saying you prompt it again and say, what do you want to do with this? For example, please help me write my quarterly report every time you do so. And then the configure tab, you might be seeing that it looks very familiar to what we have in the playground. You have upload of files, you have code interpreting skills, DALL-E image generation, web browsing. It's a little bit more limited to what you can do in the API. Of course, here functions, you can basically add whatever you want. However, of course, it's not as customer friendly. So if you want to add the function of DALL-E, then you just have to write a DALL-E call in there, whereas in ChatGPT, it would be just a click of the button here and you're all done. However, I think it's a nice way of building for you GPTs that you think you want to often use more often. I think I could be more extensive on this. I'm using chats way too much for repetitive tasks. Maybe I should go through my list of tasks that I have and see, okay, what am I doing regularly, and then go through it. And another thing, of course, that you have is this GPT store, where you can look at GPTs that others have built for things that you might want to have. For example, productivity, an Excel GPT you can see here for research purposes, consensus and size base. I found 2 very helpful GPTs to find sources or do literature reviews. Wolfram, of course, for mathematical things, and programming. You have so many GPTs that can really supercharge your programming abilities and program a lot of vanilla code that might be repetitive for you. So this is just a nice way of working with GPTs and assistants that might not be the most abstrusive things, but probably very cool things to start with. Question?
If I want to use the GPT and build an assistant, I would like to import maybe some files or so where the assistant does repetitive tasks depending on the files. Is there a way to say, okay, look only at the files and not the broader perspective of the GPT? And the second question regarding that, how to use the instructions in that sense, because you also give a kind of personality there.
Yes. So I'm not sure if I 100% got the question. The first question is, can I force it to only look at the files and not at references, other references that I have? Not 100%, because it still needs an embedding space to know where things are in its mind, so to say. However, there we are probably doing something like fine-tuning. So the data I give it there are way stronger prioritized than data it previously has. And for most of the things that you ask it, it should be good enough. Also, it asks you to work very much on what you ask it. For example, if you would like to create a GPT that suggests the right type of globally, since GPT is always positive, it would not start with the overwhelming evidence is that globally is basically worthless, does not function. Is nothing that it would come up with, but it would say, interesting, let's talk about globally, and still try to be positivistic about that. So it would probably not try to use contradictory information against you.